So, throughout many weeks now, telling these wonderful stories, we've seen how the first followers of Jesus had so many adventures. From the day of Pentecost, when they received the Holy Spirit, to the vision of Peter, where he realised that everybody, Jew and Gentile, was welcomed by Christ. We saw Saul, who persecuted the church, become the great evangelist Paul. There's been beatings, imprisonment, arguments, riots, but also so much love and prayer and healing and miracles, and many people finding freedom as they join the way of Christ. So let's meet our storyteller Luke one more time. Good morning, Luke. How are you? You're bright and bubbly this morning. Luke, we've got a lot of chapters to cover today, haven't we? How many was it? 7. 7 whole chapters. Right, well, we better get going. We've got to get all the way to the end of chapter 28, which is the last chapter of Acts. So let's meet a few of this week's characters. There's Paul, of course. Morning, Paul. Remember, he was on his way to see Jerusalem when we left. Sorry, he was on his way to Jerusalem to see James and the other apostles again, wasn't he, when we left off last time? Even though his friends had warned him that he might be walking into trouble going back to Jerusalem. And this week, we'll also meet King Agrippa. And we'll meet this young boy here. We don't know his name, actually, but he was one of Paul's nephews. And he has a really important role to play today. And don't forget to look out for this week's animal. We have a bit of a nautical theme going on because Paul's going to go on some boat journeys later. So we have this fish. Whenever you see this fish, you can wave, cheer, splash and splosh and let us know that you have spotted him. Okay, let's start our story. So Paul, he travelled on and eventually arrived in Jerusalem. He couldn't wait to go to the temple and worship God there. In Jerusalem, he met with James, who'd taken over leading the church in Jerusalem from Peter. And Paul told James all about the many people, the non-Jews, who had become followers of Jesus. And he was delighted. But then James warned Paul. He said, "There are people in Jerusalem who say that you are teaching the Jews to forget about their old customs. Be careful, Paul. They want to get you." But we are learning that wherever Paul goes, it does cause a commotion. We're used to that by now. And it wasn't long before the Jewish leaders found out that he was in the temple and started a riot. In the end, the Romans arrested Paul just to try and protect him and put him in prison. Bear with me, this is my moment. There we go. Back in prison again. Some of those who hated Paul got together. They wanted to get rid of him altogether. They made a vow not to eat anything until they had killed Paul. Can you imagine? They hatched a plan to form a gang of men who would attack Paul when he was transported from the prison by the Romans. But what they didn't know is that while they were plotting in the corner, Paul's nephew was listening in on their conversation. He heard the plan and he knew that he had to tell Paul straight away. So he ran off to the Roman prison to tell his uncle. Well, when Paul heard about the plan, he said, "Quick, go and tell the Romans what you have heard." So his nephew did. And the commander, when he heard about it, said to Paul, "Paul, I'm getting you out of here. I'm sending you to the local governor Felix in Caesarea, but with a company of 200 soldiers for your protection." And the plan of the evil gang was foiled. Well, let's get the prison bars down again because Paul is out of prison once more. Well, once Paul was in Caesarea, he stayed under arrest for a long time. First under the governor Felix, and then under the guard of Governor Festus. Now Festus was friends with a king, King Agrippa. And King Agrippa wanted to hear what Paul had to say for himself. So Paul was brought in before the king and told him his whole story. "King Agrippa," said Paul, "I was once one of the most God-fearing Jews of them all, and I hated the followers of Jesus. I thought they were wrong. But when I was travelling to Damascus to arrest the Christians, Jesus appeared to me on the road and I fell down. The Lord told me to stop persecuting him and that I must go to the rest of the world and tell others about him, that he is the way to God. And that's why I'm before you today, King Agrippa. Jesus wants you to follow him too, you know. King Agrippa said to Paul, "Do you think you can turn me into a Christian in such a short time, Paul?" Paul replied, "Well, whether a long time or a short time, O king, I pray that you and all those here might become a Christian like me." Well, King Agrippa was amazed at the boldness of Paul. But Paul was soon to be leaving again. He had appealed as a Roman citizen to the Emperor of Rome, so he was put on a ship bound for Italy. We get a lot of detail in the story about what happens on Paul's journey by boat, and that's mainly because Luke was travelling with him and went through the whole thing too. The first part of the journey was okay, it was smooth, it was plain sailing. But as they sailed along the coast of Crete, a violent storm arose. Oh no! And the ship was blown off course. And the storm was so violent that the crew had to throw some cargo and equipment overboard to lighten the load. Gosh, what a terrible storm it was. Oh, and how dangerous. They didn't see the sun for days and their food was running low. And the captain gave up all hope of being saved. But Paul spoke to the captain. He had to shout in the storm. He said, "Take heart. An angel visited me last night and told me that we will be safe. We'll lose the ship, but none of us will lose our lives. Trust in God." And sure enough, the next day, the ship ran aground and started to break into pieces. But Paul, the captain, and the sailors jumped into the water and began to swim as the boat sank. Oh, they were exhausted, but they managed to swim to shore. And they found themselves on the island of Malta. Well, Paul had some more adventures on the island of Malta, and you'll have to read Luke's full account to hear about them. The people there had never heard about Jesus, but Paul was able to tell them about him, and many people were healed and became Christians. So even the storm and the shipwreck allowed Paul to plant a church on the island of Malta. Finally, Paul arrived at his destination, Rome. There he was put under house arrest. He wrote lots of letters to the churches from there, churches that he had planted all over the Mediterranean. You wrote lots of really quite interesting and long letters, didn't you, Paul? He wrote letters to all those people he had met and had become followers of Jesus. All the churches that now existed in Rome: Corinth, Philippi, Ephesus, Colossae. He wrote to guide and encourage them. And he also wrote to friends like Timothy, Titus, and Philemon. And we have those letters today in our New Testament. You can read them straight after the book of Acts. Well, Luke, it's lucky we had you to tell us the whole story in your book, isn't it? And what happened to Paul in the end? Did he get to see the Roman emperor? Well, we don't know, do we? We don't know whether Paul did see the Roman emperor, because this is where Luke, our storyteller, finishes his account at Acts chapter 28. Some historians think Paul was set free by Emperor Nero and continued his work before finally being arrested and killed. It's been a long story, hasn't it, Luke? Just think of all that Paul and the other followers of Jesus have been through in the book of Acts. They've endured danger, threats, imprisonment, shipwrecks. Why did they do it all? Yeah, it was because of Jesus. Sharing the life-transforming love of Jesus was worth giving their whole life for. And that's the challenge the book of Acts leaves us with. Are we ready to carry on the story, to give our lives for Jesus, and to know that just like them, we are fired and inspired and helped by the Holy Spirit? We've still got those flames behind us, haven't we, Luke? Reminding us that the Spirit is always with us, as the Spirit was always with Paul and the other apostles. Well done, everybody. Do you want to come and give us a wave goodbye? Well done.